Have you ever stopped to think about beauty, not just as something you see, but as a kind of power, like an invisible currency that can open doors, change minds, and even fatten a paycheck, all before you've said a single word? That's really the heart of what people call pretty privilege, and we're about to dive deep into what that actually means.
But here's the real question we're gonna tackle. Is this so-called privilege a golden ticket, or is it more like a gilded cage? Because as you'll see, this currency has a price, and it turns out pretty much everyone pays it, whether you think you have it or not.
Now, to really get this, we have to go beyond the social media buzzwords. Sociologists have a term for this: aesthetic capital. It's a powerful idea. Just like financial capital lets you buy things, aesthetic capital gets you advantages. It's a systemic bias, where just happening to match a very narrow ideal of beauty gets you a leg up. Better grades, more credibility, you name it.
But, this way of sizing people up isn't the only way. It's not a given. To really understand our modern obsession with looks, let's take a trip back in time, like way back, almost 1,400 years, to hear a totally different take on what makes a person valuable.
Okay, listen to this. This is a saying from the Hadith, which is a collection of teachings from the Prophet Muhammad. And it just draws this incredibly clear line in the sand. It says that what really matters, the ultimate judgment, isn't based on the outside stuff, your looks, how much money you have, but on what's inside, your character and what you actually do.
So in philosophy, this is what you'd call the text horizon. It was a message for its own time, a 7th century world that was, you guessed it, also judging people based on their status and looks. So this wasn't just a religious guideline, it was a really strong social critique of a shallow value system. And that critique is about to become super important.
Because now, let's rocket right back to today. We live in this unbelievably visual world, basically an economy built on looks, where that ancient critique suddenly feels more relevant than it's ever been. In our world, there are these two big forces going on. First, there's lookism, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's straight-up discrimination that favors attractive people. But then there's the other side of it, effective labor. This is all that invisible, exhausting work, and let's be honest, it's mostly women doing it, of performing beauty. Not because of vanity, but because it feels like a strategic requirement just to get by.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. A study on workplace discrimination in Indonesia gives us a really potent example. An employee, a woman named Dilla, she shared how she felt not considered for a role simply because she didn't fit their ideal of what someone should look like. Her skills, her experience, it was like they were invisible.
And our digital lives, well, they just pour gasoline on this fire. An internal study revealed that for nearly a third of teenage girls, when they're already having a bad day, scrolling through Instagram actively makes them feel worse about their bodies. I mean, that's a real measurable psychological cost.
So, you've got this ancient message about inner worth on one hand, and this modern world totally obsessed with outer appearance on the other. What happens when these two worlds, these two horizons, collide? This is where it gets really fascinating.
We can actually use this brilliant idea from a philosopher named Hans-Georg Gadamer. It's called the fusion of horizons. It sounds complex, but it's really not. Think of it like putting on a pair of ancient glasses to see our modern problems with fresh eyes. When the horizon of the past text meets the horizon of our reality today, they merge and create this totally new, powerful way of understanding things.
So, here's the bottom line. When we do this, the Hadith isn't just some 1,400-year-old moral lesson anymore. It becomes this sharp, incredibly modern critique of our entire culture of aesthetic capital, of lookism, and of all the pressure we feel to look a certain way. It basically diagnoses our modern problem.
And what exactly is that problem? Well, it's a system that creates a two-sided burden. It messes with everyone's head, inflicting these hidden psychological costs, whether you fit the standard or not. So let's break down what those hidden costs really are.
For people who feel they fall outside that narrow ideal, the costs are pretty well known, and they are devastating. There's this constant body surveillance, that feeling of always being watched and judged. That can lead to social alienation, deep body dissatisfaction, and, as research shows, a much higher risk for things like anxiety and eating disorders.
But what about the other side of that coin? This is what we could call the dark side of pretty privilege. For those who do benefit, there's this enormous pressure to maintain their appearance. They often struggle with shallow relationships, always wondering, do they like me for me or just for how I look? This can spark a real identity crisis, and even more dangerously, can lead to objectification and harassment.
Model Emily Adon put it perfectly. She said, pretty privilege isn't always a privilege.
She talks about constantly being harassed, touched without her consent, and being seen as something to be possessed. That privilege suddenly becomes a target on your back.
Okay, so if the system is basically a lose-lose for everyone involved, how do we get past it? How do we stop measuring a person's entire value based on a reflection in a mirror or a filtered picture on a screen?
The real makeover we need has nothing to do with us as individuals. It's about the system itself. First, we just have to acknowledge that aesthetic capital is a real thing. Step 2, we need to actively challenge the gaze, to question lookism when we see it. And third, we have to consciously work to redefine the metrics, to shift our focus and society's focus back to things like character, skill, and yes, our deeds.
In the end, the makeover that is so desperately needed isn't about changing people. It's about changing the very standards we use to measure their value in the first place. So as we all start to challenge those outside standards, we're left with one last, much more personal question. What truly defines your reflection?